Hello, I'm Eunice, and this is my project for criminology. What is criminology? Our textbook defines it as an interdisciplinary science that gathers and analyzes data on various aspects of crime and criminal behavior. What makes individuals prone to crime? It can be due to various reasons: biological factors, psychological factors, ACEs, otherwise known as adverse childhood experiences, a negative social environment such as poverty, difficult family conditions, peer pressure, deprivation, unemployment, or substance abuse. It could be a combination of these factors. What steps can we take to reduce crime? So I wanted to do my project on ways we can hopefully reduce crime and get to the root of the issue, instead of quick band-aid fixes and repeating the cycle of incarceration. We need to fix problems at the source. Why are they committing these crimes? And why are the same people ending up back in prison? If we start at the root, many people do not become criminals overnight. There's a reason a majority of crimes are committed by people with lower socioeconomic status or have disadvantageous circumstances. These individuals usually have less access to social, financial, educational, and health resources. Social root causes of crime are inequality, lack of support to families and neighborhoods, lack of education and opportunities, inaccessibility to services, need for leadership in communities, low value placed on children, and individual well-being. What does this look like? It can be being born to a single teen mother, living in high crime urban areas, perhaps living in poverty, fighting day to day just to make rent and pay bills, not being able to get a job, or living on the streets. Back to the question, how do we reduce crime? We have to attack this issue at every level: the individual level, the family level, the school and community levels, etc. However, for my presentation, I will be focusing on the personal or individual level. A lot of the individuals who commit crimes have high ACEs. We take it all the way back to childhood. What are ACEs? It stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. These are potentially traumatic events that occur during childhood, birth through 17 years of age. As you can see in this diagram, this could be from maternal depression, emotional and sexual abuse, substance abuse, domestic violence, physical and emotional neglect, divorce, mental illness, incarceration, or homelessness. On the bottom, you see the roots, which symbolize adverse community environments, what you tend to see in communities of lower socioeconomic status. And this could cover poverty, discrimination, community disruption, lack of opportunity, economic mobility and social capital, poor housing quality and affordability, as well as violence. ACEs can follow an intergenerational pattern. Generational trauma is a transference of traumatic experiences or stressors from one generation to the next. One of many types of trauma, it can happen through direct experience, witnessing violence, or living in an environment where violence is a constant threat. For example, research suggests that children who experience physical abuse may be more likely to commit violence, including neglecting or abusing their own children. And then these children grow up, become parents, and may be more likely to commit violence, including abusing their own children, and so forth. Research shows around 64% of the general population has had at least one ACE. This number jumps to a staggering 98% for people in prison. 98%. In one study, people who had committed criminal offenses reported nearly 4 times as many ACEs than an average adult male. And with each additional ACE youth report, the risk of violence perpetration increased by 35 to 144%. This is why education and training on ACEs and changing public health focus to collective action will ensure better outcomes. Experiencing many ACEs, as well as things like racism and community violence, without supportive adults can cause what's known as toxic stress. This excessive activation of the stress response system can lead to altering the brain. Basically, the more ACEs you have, the higher chance you have of dealing with these issues later on. Things like chronic disease, psychiatric disorders, impaired cognition, work and school, the attendance, behavior, and performance aspects can be altered, obesity, possible addiction to alcohol, tobacco, and drugs, engaging in risky sex behavior, crime, poverty, and as we covered, intergenerational transmission, disparity. And because childhood is when the brain is forming and developing, there are many parts of the brain that can be impacted. The amygdala, which is known as the fear center, is supposed to protect you from danger. It tends to be enlarged and hyperactive after prolonged stress. But when the amygdala is activated, the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive functioning part of the brain, this is where logical decisions are made. It gets turned off. So the primitive parts of the brain are activated for survival, but your thinking part of the brain is off. The hippocampus, which is essential for learning and memory, shrinks after severe stress. This can lead to problems with learning and staying focused. Not only is the brain and different parts impacted, but genetics comes into play as well. Epigenetics are changes and modifications to DNA that regulate whether certain genes are turned on and off. Depending on how much stress or trauma that you go through, this can change your genetics. Exposure to major adversity in early childhood can weaken brain development. This can permanently set the body's stress response system on high alert. A stable, nurturing environment, however, can prevent these responses. On the left side, you see a normal, typical neuron, and it has many connections. On the right, you see toxic stress and how it impacts a neuron, causing fewer connections. This is to give you an overall visual of the impact toxic stress could have on the brain. The one on the left is an image of a healthy 3-year-old with an average head size, and the scan on the right, which is far smaller and has far more blurry structures, is the brain of a 3-year-old who has suffered extreme emotional trauma and neglect. The scan on the left has significantly less structures and is much bigger than the one on the right. Dr. Bruce Perry said the child on the right suffered from severe sensory deprivation neglect. Dr. Bruce Perry was a guest speaker at the American Justice Summit and spoke on the power of experience and how it shapes the brain. Unpredictability, chaos, significant exposure to violence changes stress response systems, which may lead to individuals more prone to engage in crime. Now that we know that prevention starts very young, what can be done to help save such children from a life of crime? Well, to prevent ACEs, CDC created a diagram to show what we can implement. It shows things like home visits for prenatal care and families with newborns, parent support programs for teens and teen pregnancy prevention, parenting training programs. So you see there's a lot having to do with parents, mental illness and substance abuse treatment, programs to prevent domestic violence, high-quality childcare, social support for parents, and funding to lift people out of poverty. Now, what about the individuals that are already imprisoned? I stumbled across the Compassion Prison Project while researching, and they hold ideals to what I believe will be transformative. We need restorative measures to help change the mass incarceration culture. instead of the vicious cycle that repeats from crime to prison to punishment to release, then back to crime and prison yet again. We need a way to help these individuals who have been released to thrive. This can be incredibly difficult due to employment discrimination, housing discrimination, lack of public benefits like food stamps. Michelle Alexander, the author of The New Jim Crow, wisely stated that these individuals need shelter, food, education, and safe places. We must shift from the punitive approach to more rehabilitative and restorative approaches. We need to embrace their humanness. In conclusion, we have a long road ahead of us, but there is hope. We need to educate, inform, and lead with compassion, but change can happen. Thank you. And here is the works cited page.